Most people think they are doing the right thing by saving money, but they are actually losing money every single year. And it is not because they are spending it, it is because of where they are keeping their savings. And the difference between putting your savings in the right place versus the wrong place can literally cost you thousands of dollars over time. But the good news is that this is a very easy fix. So in this video, I am going to show you exactly where your money should be saved as well as where it should not be. So before we jump into the video, comment down below, where do you keep your current savings? For me, I keep a little bit of money in just a normal savings account, but most of my savings, which is my emergency fund, I keep in a high yield savings account with Capital One. And so the main problem that I want to talk about here is once people develop the habit of saving, they are saving money, which is great, but then they are putting their saved money in the wrong place because most people just think that saving means you earn your money and then you save your money. When in reality, you earn money, you save money, store the savings properly, and then any money left over after that, you should probably be investing long term. And most people stop after the second thing, which is just saving money. They do not think about how do they store that money properly, or they just keep saving after that, and they do not actually start putting their money to work for them, which is really important. And a very clear example of this is imagine that there are two people and they both save up $10,000. And the first person, they just keep their savings in a regular savings account. They get 0.01% a year. While the second person keeps their $10,000 in a high yield savings account, getting between 3 to 4% interest a year. And so after 1 year, the first person, they basically earn nothing from interest, while the second person is earning like $300 to $400 a year, which is pretty solid. And so although both of these people saved up $10,000, the interest that they earned is completely different. And this gap is only going to get bigger and bigger if you save up more and more money. That is only 10K, imagine 25 or 50 or $100,000. Because when it comes to the regular savings account that gets you basically no yield for your money, that is typically done through a lot of banks, and at the end of the day, the banks are businesses. They are using your deposits to then loan that money out and make money off of it. And so if you are only getting 0.01%, then the banks are winning big time and you are not really getting anything for it. And so the reality is that saving money, it is only half of it. Where you keep your savings will determine whether that is going to grow or whether that is just going to sit there. Now, I do want to briefly touch on the worst places to keep your money. So the first one is kind of like the one I just said, just a traditional savings account. And this is not always a bad decision, but if you are going to start storing, $5, $10, $20,000+ and you want to get a little bit of yield off of it, you are not going to be getting it in just your traditional everyday bank savings account. A lot of times people do not deviate from these accounts because it is normally like their first account that was opened up, whether they were in middle school or high school or college. And so it is just really convenient to just keep putting your money into that savings, and they just do not really question it at all. But like the example I just gave, if you are slowly saving up like thousands of dollars a year and you are only getting 0.01%. Like if you get 0.01% on $10,000, that is literally $1 a year. And the thing that really sucks about this is that inflation normally goes up between 2 to 3% a year. And so you are actually losing $200 to $300 in purchasing power every year from that $10,000 sitting there not getting you any yield. Because anybody that has paid their bills in the last 5 years knows that things get more expensive. A dollar today is worth more than a dollar 3 years from now. $100 of groceries 5 years ago got us way more groceries than $100 does today. And that is inflation. And it has honestly been kicking our ass, especially lately at the gas stations. If you guys have not noticed that, but anyone that pays for their gas probably has. And so when it comes to the traditional savings account, you are doing the right thing by saving, but you are still getting punished for it. Like I said, you are losing money to inflation. It is almost like you are losing money even though you are saving money. Because like I said, you only get 0.01% a year, but then you are losing 2 to 3% a year to inflation. You are technically losing money if you look at the math that way. And one thing I do want to make clear is I am mainly talking about savings accounts here when it comes to checking accounts. Those are great for bills and spending money. I am not talking about checking accounts really at all. I mean, the only thing I would say is with checking accounts, I would not use that to be storing, real savings. Whether that is an emergency fund or whether you are trying to save up to buy a house, I would keep that in a separate account. At least that is what I do, and it makes it a lot easier. And so I do want to talk about the savings options that you guys could use. Now, the one I mentioned at the beginning of the video, a lot of people call it a high yield savings account. A lot of times with the high yield savings accounts, it is owned by online banks, which means they have a little bit lower overhead, a little bit lower cost there. There are really no physical branches. So again, less expense means they can give us higher rates. It is pretty nice. So then you can actually get that like 3 to 4% a year. And that is not always the case. Sure, there are some big companies that have high yield savings accounts, but typically those higher yields are from slightly more competitive online players. And the nice thing with a high yield savings account is it works exactly like a regular savings account. I mean, you have really good liquidity. It is not like your money is locked up and you cannot touch it or anything like that. At most places, when you have a high yield savings account, it is FDIC insured, which basically means if the bank were to go under, you are not going to lose your money. You are okay. And it is also just really simple. Like you can open up a high yield savings account, I am not kidding, in probably 15 minutes. It is very, very simple. And so like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I use my high yield savings account for my emergency fund. But you can also use it if you are looking at, more short-term purchases, whether that is saving up for a car or maybe more medium term if you're looking to save up for a house in the next 3 to 5 years. A high yield savings account is great for that. Or if you just want to save up and budget for something, getting a little bit of yield along the way, that is always going to be a nice thing. And one question people might have is, oh, well, what happens if the rates go down? Like, should I just keep changing savings accounts? I would not personally do that. I would just stick to one, and that is what I have done. And honestly, rates are going to go down. If the Fed cuts rates, as you will notice, if you have a high yield savings account, your rate will go down a little bit more and a little bit more. And that is okay, that is normal. But in my opinion, I would rather get 2% on my emergency fund than 0.01% like the original example. So I would just stick to that logic mainly. And I really do feel like it is just as safe as a normal bank unless you are doing some really sketchy one that has a really high yield. But most large companies that you have heard of or you have probably seen ads for have pretty good high yield savings accounts. Like I said, the rates right now are typically between, I would say, like 3 to 4%, depending on which one you are at. And so this is the option that I use. I love the high yield savings account, and in my opinion, the best account that you can have is one that is going to keep your money safe. It is with the company you can trust, and your money is just going to slightly grow along the way. You do not have to think about it. You do not have to sit there and freak out or stress about it. It is just very simple. So that is the first option, is a high yield savings account. Now, the second option is called a CD, or a certificate of deposit. CDs are kind of interesting because they do offer a little bit more structure, but a lot less flexibility. So for example, it is almost like you are making a deal when you have a CD. It is like, okay, I am going to buy the CD and I am not going to touch this money for X amount of time, whether it is 6 months, whether it is 1 year. And in exchange for me not touching the money, I am going to get a higher rate, which is pretty nice. And so that is one of the main pros with it, is that you do get a higher rate and the return is extremely predictable. But the con is that if you try to withdraw that money early, let us say you buy a 1-year CD, if you try to then withdraw that money at the 6-month mark, you could get penalized for it. And so that is kind of a downside to it, is that your money is locked away. Like for me, I want my money, if I am putting it in a high yield savings account, or if I am just trying to get a little bit of yield off of its share, I do not want it to be locked up. So that is the main reason I do not do CDs. But if you know you are not going to touch this money 100% for the next 1, 2, 3 years, then you know it could be a good option for you. Like if you are saving up for a down payment on a house in 3 years and you know I am definitely not touching this money in the next 12 months, then maybe, 1-year CD could be a good move for you. And I will say that CDs could be really good for people that are looking for more structure because it forces you not to touch the money. So it could be a pro or it could be a con, just depending on how you are with money. I feel like when it comes to the high yield savings account, you get that flexibility compared to with the CD. You get a little bit less flexibility, but you get a higher yield, and it does give you something you kind of have to commit to, or else you are penalized for it. So that is a CD, which is our second option. Now, the third one is a money market account, or like a money market fund. This one is kind of like in the middle of a high yield savings account and a CD, because when you have a money market account, that is typically done through banks, whereas money market funds are typically done through brokerages. And you want to think of this as like a slightly more optimal savings account, because you can use this if you are trying to hold cash while you are investing. So like, for example, if you have $10,000 in a cash account, but you want to have it in the same account that you are going to be like investing in, so you are waiting for the market to dip, you could buy a money market fund. It could be good for that, but your money is not locked up in this either. So it is not like a CD where your money is locked up. But, you can put it into like things like a brokerage account, which is good. The main difference between a high yield savings account and then like a money market account or a money market fund is that sometimes you get a little bit higher rates, and then it is also tied to a brokerage account. So if you want to deploy that money quickly, if the market has a really bad day, the money market account is going to get you there a little bit quicker. But again, that is just a timing thing. I feel like that is if you are impatient. If you are a long-term investor like me, I am not really stressed whether I am moving my money over on a Monday or on a Wednesday, because I am just going to keep buying consistently. That is the way I think about it, but again, it could be a good use case for whoever you are. And if you do not want to overthink any of this stuff, I genuinely do think a high yield savings account, it is going to give you pretty much 80 to 90% of what you need. But this is also just another option that you could consider. And so when it comes to actually strategizing your money and saving your money, what a lot of people do is they just have one account, they put all of their money in it, and that is it. And I do think sometimes that can get confusing, because if you are trying to save up for a house and you are trying to build an emergency fund, but then also this is savings for like a vacation or something like that. If you have 2, 3, 4 different things that you are saving up for all in one account, then the only way to separate each of these things would either be to write it down or to have it in a spreadsheet somewhere, which just seems a little bit more confusing than it needs to be. Compared to what I personally do, is I try to break it down into a couple of different buckets. And this is the nice thing with like some high yield savings accounts is you could have a high yield savings account for your vacation, a high yield savings account for your house savings, and then your emergency fund. Like you can separate it out. And of course you can do that with regular savings. But again, remember, we want to get yield on that money so it does not lose value to inflation every year. So the first bucket that I always focus on is building up that emergency fund. I talk about it so much in my videos. And like I said, I put mine in a high yield savings account. This is typically going to be 3 to 6 months of expenses. It is very simple here. The whole point of an emergency fund is if you have obviously emergencies come up, whether it is car troubles, whether it is some big medical bill that hits, or whether maybe you lose your job or something, and you have 6 months of expenses ready to go on the side. That gives you time to not sit there and stress and freak out. And it also prevents you from having to go into any debt if you have an emergency or having to sell any stocks or investments if you have an emergency. So building up your emergency fund should be a top priority. So that is always the first thing I prioritize. Now, the second thing when it comes to savings is I would try to then focus on any short or medium term goals that I have. So this is a timeline of, I would say, like 0 to 3 years. Like I've already talked about a lot in this video. This could be like saving up for a house. Sometimes people will ask me, they will be like, oh, should I invest my money into the S&P 500 if I want to buy a house 2 or 3 years from now? And I always say no to that, because what happens if the market tanks over the next 2 years, then you have to wait for that to bounce back just for you to break even. When it comes to saving up for a big purchase, please do not invest that money. I am begging you, I know I am not a financial advisor, this is not professional financial advice, but it could be a very stupid move if you do that. So when it comes to saving up for a house or a car, or whether you are saving up for any big thing that could happen, like a wedding or an engagement ring, any big expense that you have coming up, please just save it. Do not invest that money, especially if you need that money within 1 to 2 to 3 years. Now, if you're waiting 5+ years, then there could be an argument to be made there. But 0 to 3 year timeline, just put it in a high yield savings or any of the savings accounts I said and leave it alone. Because if you need this money soon, there is no point in risking it. I do not see any upside to that. So that is the second bucket I would focus on. And then the third one is your long-term money. If you already have an emergency fund, if you are already saved up for anything you want, whether it is a house, whether it is a car, any big purchase, or maybe you are not even saving for that stuff, you do not have those goals right now. And that is okay. Then I do feel like your long-term money, I am talking 5, 7, 10+ years, should not be in savings. Again, this is assuming you already have an emergency fund. For me, every single dollar after the emergency fund that is maxed out goes towards investing, because I want that money growing. I do not want it growing 3 or 4% a year, which is fine for saving, but I want my money compounding between 8 to 10% a year over decades, because there is a huge gap between getting 3% a year in savings and getting 10% a year in the market. I mean, if you just type in compound interest calculator, just go look at that over 20, 30, 40 years. If you were to save or invest $500 a month, it is a huge difference. And I do feel like a lot of people make this error because they sit on the sidelines, but you do want your money to be working for you aggressively, especially if you want to retire. You are not going to save your way to retirement. I just do not think that is possible unless if you are making a ridiculous amount of money. And even then, you could probably be optimizing your money better by investing it. So regardless, I do think you should be investing once you have the emergency fund fully built up, and then you have all your short-term and medium-term goals checked off, or maybe you are just not focused on that right now. And that is okay as well. So just briefly going over some common mistakes that I feel like people make when it comes to stuff. I already said one of them, and that is keeping everything in one account. It is super easy to overspend, and it is really hard to keep track of things if you are trying to save up for 3 things and then you are paying bills out of this account. It is just kind of all over the place. So that is the first mistake I definitely see people make. The next one I would say, I did mention this a little bit earlier, is chasing rates like all the time. Like if you get a 3.5% interest rate on your high yield savings account, do not switch banks just to get 0.2% and then switch it again back when this one changes. Like just stick to one. It is so much easier. You do not want to sit there and be moving your money all around and have 8 different high yield savings accounts at 8 different banks. And you are all trying to find which one has the highest yield on any given month or year. Like just calm down with it and stick to what works. So that is the second mistake people make. Another one, I did mention this quite a bit, is investing your short-term to medium-term money. I'm specifically talking about saving up for a house. Like I said, if the market drops 20 or 30% over the next year or two and you had $50,000 saved up, now you got to wait for that money to bounce back. And that is just a lot more stressful than it needs to be. So just keep it in a savings account, do not invest it, especially if it is short term. And so that is a really big one. And then another mistake after that people tend to make is they do not have an emergency fund at all. And the reason you want to have an emergency fund is in case if obviously an emergency happens. You do not want to have to go into credit card debt. You do not want to have to sell your investments, and you do not want to have to stress about money. So it is really important to have that cushion for yourself. And then the final mistake that a lot of people make is they just let their money just sit for years on end without growing. And I feel like this one can low-key just be a silent killer, especially when we see inflation start to pick up. It is like, damn, that is really just eating away at your money and you have not done anything with it. Your money is not going to work for you at all. Your money could just be like Luka hitting threes from deep, but instead you are putting it on the bench. Like, what are you doing? So if you can avoid all these mistakes, it is only going to help you out long term. And honestly, a lot of those mistakes, they are not huge mistakes, but they do add up over time. So it is important to try to avoid those. So the main steps that you want to take to actually build up savings is the first thing you want to do is try to audit yourself. And I am even going to do this with myself coming up here in the next week or so. Look at where your money is currently going. Are you saving money or are you overspending in certain areas? How much money are you bringing in versus how much money are you spending? And then the next thing you are going to do is open up either a high yield savings account or you are going to find a place to buy CDs or put your money into a money market fund. But try to go get some yield with your savings. It literally takes 10 to 15 minutes. It is not like you got to sit there and jump through 100 hoops just to open a high yield savings account. Like, you can do it almost instantly. So that is the next thing you are going to do. And then after that, you want to build up an emergency fund. All you got to do is just throw 50 bucks here and there at it, or throw 100 bucks here and there at it. Whenever you have a little bit of extra money, before you know it, you are going to have $1,000. And from there on out, try to save up 3 months of expenses and then maybe get to 6 months of expenses and then go from there. And let us pretend you already have an emergency fund. One thing I would recommend doing is trying to separate your goals. Like I said earlier, with a lot of high yield savings accounts, you can create either multiple accounts so that you can separate your money that way. You have money saved up for vacations and money saved up for your house, and then your emergency fund. It is not all in one place. And so if you can like physically separate out your accounts under one website, under one company, it just keeps it super simple. It keeps it separated that way. You can also automate your saving. And so you could throw 50 bucks a week into your emergency fund and then 25 bucks a week in your vacation fund. And it is just so much easier that way. And the last thing you're going to do once you get all these things set up is focus on getting your long-term money into investing. Do not let that money sit. And so I feel like this is a very straightforward thing that you can do. And that is the nice part with all this, is you can literally fix it in like 15 to 20 minutes. It is not that hard. I mean, okay, the budgeting part, that might take an hour or two, but besides that, every other step is very quick and very simple. And I have made plenty of videos on this channel talking about how to invest your money and how to budget and what order your money should go in. And so if you are looking for any of that stuff, just check it out on my channel. And if you have any questions, obviously drop me a comment and I am more than happy to help out. And so that is it for me, and that is where you should put your savings and how you should prioritize your money in regards to saving. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, drop a like down below and hit that subscribe button. I will see you in the next one. Peace.